That was a doozy. That season 2 finale, but also kind of seems like it could be a series finale, although we're not quite sure. Uh, from what I've read, they'd only they wrote this season to be a conclusion to a book of Loki. A chapter, two chapters in Loki's story, season 1 and season 2, and there was no really intention to go on, but they're leaving it open ended, and there's a possibility that we'll see a season 3. But what it looks like this is leading into, of course, the the series known as the Marvel Cinematic Universe, um, the next chapter of that series, and Loki will probably show up in a future film, uh, probably Secret Wars, Kang Dynasty, one of those Avenger movies coming up. I mean, we'll get into the episode particularly, and we'll talk about where I think things are heading. Uh, but as for episode 6 of season 2, that rattled my brain a bit, right? I actually had to repeat a couple scenes there at the end just to get my head straight. But I do recommend uh, watching the whole series back to back because you can binge it at your leisure. But like I did this week, these last few days, I went back to episode 1 of Loki, uh, and just started watching it again. And leading up to tonight, where tonight I watched episode 5 and 6 back to back. Yep. And it's because it makes sense. It flows. It flows better, like time does in general when you are thinking about things sequentially in chronological order. But this show kind of messes with that, doesn't it? And that's what makes it fun. And this episode in particular really rewound and fast forward and paused and really took that remote control away from you and really messed with the times. And it was pretty cool. I liked it. I did end up liking it, I guess, but it did feel like the messaging in general ended up being a little bit broad so as to appease a multitude of viewers, and you can get what you want from it in a way. Um, it was a little bit disappointing in the sense that I would have liked it have been more clear with its messaging. And the thing is that like that's kind of what Marvel does, That's just a Marvel movie because they could always readjust uh, and do something completely different in the next episode. And what I mean is the next movie or the next TV show. So you can pick and choose which Marvel movies and shows you like, and kind of attach your own politics, your ideas to it. That's kind of how I think these superhero Marvel movies are made. But it did end up aligning itself generally speaking. The film aligns itself with the show aligns itself with Loki in the end, right? He's the hero in the end, and he learns some lessons from his friends, but he's the one who takes that step and fixes everything apparently, right? And like I feel like the show maybe leans a little bit too much towards this idea that there is some authority, like God, like Loki, for example, a god is is beneficial, is good for the multiverse, you know. So you could certainly interpret it as a little bit fashy, but we've got some interesting characters in there, like Sylvie, who's a kind of posted that. Though I feel like maybe she could have, I would have written it differently, whatever. But maybe she could have caused a little bit more of a ruckus at the end there when Loki sat on a throne there at the end. But let's get into the episode. Let's break it down. We're already in spoilers pretty much, right? If you're watching this, like, this is episode 6, the last episode of season 2. Like, you gotta have watched all the episodes, right? You gotta have watched what I'm about to talk about. I mean, why would you be here if you haven't? Maybe you don't care about spoilers. Maybe you're the kind of viewer of TV, of Marvel, of etc., of movies who doesn't really care too much about spoilers, huh? I see you. It's okay. But either way, you've been warned. There's a spoilers are coming. Okay, so let's get into that show we all like watching, Loki. So we're gonna go down scene by scene pretty much and go over what's happening and what I'm thinking about in that moment. It's like we're winding time. It's kind of like we're some kind of god or superhero who can travel through time and space and end up here, for example, with Mobius. But first, let's start over here. Let's begin in the previously on, which we get a lot of previously on. It starts off actually with is that an Avengers movie or a Thor movie? One of those movies. The early days of Loki, And then we bring up this scene, which is important because we're gonna loop back to it. This is the final scene, right? One of the final scenes in season 1's finale. So we're time looping all the way back. And we're going through a lot of these places because it's like Loki gets the power to rewind time. Starting here, though, of course, where the episode 5 ended off, where episode 5, it was like, yo, Loki's like, I can control my time slipping, and decides that he is the person who's going to solve the problem. Because it's not about the why, who, where. I mean, it's not about the why, where, what. It's about the who, is what he said. And so he goes back in here, and he's like, okay, I gotta fix this. So what he does is pretty interesting, pretty clever. And by the way, I believe a lot of the writers in this show are like writers who worked on Rick and Morty. So it definitely shows all this time travel-y, science fiction-y plot lines and threads in here that this show likes to dabble in extensively. But yeah, so he decides, he's like, I'm gonna like figure out how to do this the right way and not have Victor Timely evaporate into string theory, what the scientists call it, for sure. Spaghetti is what other people say. So he's gonna keep rewinding and back and retrying endlessly, and as a god and a persistent god who wants to be right, I mean, he's loving this. Like, he gets to like show off, like, look, I am correct. You're gonna listen to me because I know exactly what I'm talking about. And he explains all this. It's pretty fun. It's a really fun sequence. I really like this whole thing. It leads up. It's humorous for sure, but it works in this show, and it works for this character because it's definitely what Loki would do, right? He wants to prove that he's a know-it-all, kind of, and this time he gets to do it because he gets to repeat Groundhog Day style, but he's in control, So if they finally do it, right? And this is a cool sequence because it's like, okay, at this moment, I was like, oh shit, he's gonna go spaghetti right now. He's gonna become spaghetti. Or maybe like a little later, right here or something. But no, it actually succeeds. So this is the scene where it's like, hey, we actually did it. Success. Except there's a twist, and this is the moment where in the episodes where you're like, oh shit, I guess Loki isn't right, and we're gonna keep going deeper into the well of this timey-wimey despair here, pretty much. He learns he spent a million years or so, or centuries. I think centuries later, he spent repeating this time loop in order to freaking learn uh, the physics and the science behind all this stuff, so he can quickly explain all this stuff to these people. His friends. Turns out wasn't enough because you can't contain the infinite. So he's got to go back to the start and freaking convince Sylvie that she can't kill. She can't kill He Who Remains because that's what causes it all. So it's all Sylvie's fault. Damn it. Which is kind of an unfortunate turn for. I mean, that's her story all along, right? That she's like has to accept the fact or come to terms with the idea that, oh, maybe she's the one who caused it all, right? But it actually, you could interpret it different ways. She caused this multiverse, this Kang multiverse war in a way, but then you can also just go back to Victor or to Kang himself. The different versions of him. He Who Remains paved the road, right? You can also consider that she did this and it was maybe her fault, but maybe it's good that she did it, and maybe we should thank Sylvie for killing Kang because that leads to Loki taking over, and Loki gets, and at the end, we'll get to the end. So what I'm saying is, let's not be too quick and blame Sylvie here. He shows off here with his positive time. Guess what? This scene definitely was a bit confusing. I had to like rewind it. I had to see it a couple times, and it's one of those. And this show in general is one of those series where like it probably is beneficial to watch a few times to really get your head around it. But here's a moment. I think this is actually the moment that I rewatched. He is like, Loki's like, you know what? I'll change the formula. In which He Remains is still like, doesn't matter if you get rid of the time loom thing, that'll get rid of your friends. So even if you change the formula, are you gonna be able to recreate your friends? I mean, maybe, but he figures out how to save his friends, and I guess rewrite the formula. I guess he figures out. We'll get to it. He kind of figures out to like hold the time multiverse together in order for his friends to TVA to kind of continue and try to figure out what to do next. So he ends up even going further back in time to episode 1 where he's caught, right? This is episode 1 of season 1. And we get a little tale from Mobius explaining, kind of illustrating more what drives Mobius now, like what drove him to put his faith in TVA, which is interesting because one thing in season one, it's all about Mobius, uh, defending his stance and defending his allegiance to the TVA. And here we get a clear understanding of why that is. But then it ends that season with him even like saying to Sylvie at the penultimate episode of season 1, as he exits into a time door back to TVA, he's like, "I'm gonna burn it down. Thanks for giving him the spark," he says to Loki. So he's all ready to burn it down season 1 before things go kablooey with the timeline when he who remains is gone. Is that but then in this season he's all about preserving TVA again. So it's kind of it's just kind of interesting how like at the first season I thought perhaps we were getting a Mobius change for the good, for the change in the way that he was gonna basically, like, what I'm trying to say is that I felt that season 1 was trying to tell us that TVA was meant to end and Mobius has completed his character arc, right? In that sense, and that season 2 would be a way for an examination of how he would go about it, and in a way season 2 is kind of like that, in the way that in season 2 him and B12 are kind of restructuring the TVA, or at least attempting to, but it still feels a bit odd with the idea of him saying, "I'm gonna burn it down," in season 1. So it feels like they have different writers, and I think do have different writers. Like maybe they changed because someone at the top or someone was like, "Hey, let's not get too radical here. Let's not get too up in arms about the TVA and burning it down." But here it goes to show this scene is where we discover that he had a choice to make at one. In his early days in TVA, he had to either kill a variant child to save thousands, right? To save a whole universe or whatever, because they needed to prune that universe because it was a variant. And then he hesitated, but then by hesitating, that caused deaths of his teammates, his crew, and then he lives that burden. That was because he hesitated, because it didn't. It's kind of a utilitarian idea, kind of similar, you might say, to Thanos, the idea that you sacrifice, the few to save the many. His partner was the one who actually killed pruned the variant, and relieving Mobius of that awful choice, of like having to kill a kid. But he looks up to Rabona for that in that scene, And that's the wisdom he imparts, which is a troubled wisdom, perhaps contrary to the messages of season 1's ending, which was mostly about we shouldn't justify our horrors because the ending, the conclusion, the consequences are worth it, for whatever reason. Like ends don't, justify the means type of logic, which I think season 1 was against. So like, it's like we're going back to the idea of like, no, maybe the ends justify the means. So it's a little bit authoritarian here in conclusion that Mobius comes to here, right? It definitely illustrates why someone would continue to and believe in the TVA, right? Of course, this is before, you know, the events of season 1 and before he teams up with B12 to reform the TVA. But it's not quite. I'm not quite clear what exactly Loki got out of that, at exchange. He's like asking all his friends, pretty much, like his top 2 friends, really, Sylvie and Mobius, what to do. Mobius offers one side, previous Mobius, the more utilitarian route, while Sylvie gives the opposite. It's like, hey, like, let people die trying. You shouldn't have the right. You don't have the right you're supposedly a god, but you don't have the right to take away life like that, even if it's utilitarian, even if you gotta let people have free will, etc., all that stuff. And so at this point, I thought maybe the show was leaning towards that, right? But it kind of like sidesteps that. And he's like, well, actually, you're right that we can burn these things down, but only if we can replace it with something better. And I guess the something better is, I guess, the TVA figuring it out at the end here, a better version of TVA, and he has to sacrifice himself to provide that. But we can also kind of interpret this as maybe Loki taking a throne, so to speak, right? He is the better option. He's the one who figured it out. He's the one who had the power as a god to decide for all humanity that I'm going to create this new type of timeline, this infinite branch, this tree of life, Yggdrasil, one might say, the Norse tree of life, tree from Norse mythology, which we'll see in a bit. And we have this whole sequence here, pretty fantastical sequence of Loki ascending to his new throne at the end of time, or I guess the beginning and the time, one of those things that time is always there. He pulls these threads together, and he's literally holding the multiverse together with his green papas. And apparently Sylvie's like, oh, I guess he's giving us a chance, she says. So she's like on board with this. She's like, oh, okay, this is good. Even though he has this like crown, he's like sitting on a throne. The imagery is all like, like a king, right? Theocratic, feudalistic idea that this god is destined to rule on this at the end of time here. But is he ruling is a thing. Like, it's not quite clear where he'll end up in future movies. Like, is he gonna like can take complete control, or is he the kind of god that like creates this tree and just lets people live on their branches, and do as they please in free will? That's the optimistic viewpoint, right? The optimistic conclusion we can have is that Loki is not going to be another He Who Remains. Loki is going to be a god that just, I guess, sits there and allows free will. The thing is that it feels like, I guess, it is a sacrifice, and it's framed like a sacrifice. Like, he's a type of Jesus figure almost. sacrificing for everybody else. But I'm not sure I buy that's going to last long. But for the end of this show, or this season at least, we're to imagine that, I guess he's a peaceful ruler. He's not gonna intervene. A peaceful creator, I guess, more like it. But then again, maybe in a future episode of the MCU will have the question asked of us. Well, if he doesn't intervene, then isn't he kind of amoral or maybe immoral? Maybe he should intervene to help the people who need it. That could be a whole other philosophical conundrum we'll deal with in another movie. I don't know. I'm kind of making sense of all this as I'm going through this again. And it's definitely one of those shows where you can spend many hours pondering and philosophizing what it could all mean, and what could it lead to, right? And that's kind of the fun of speculating and talking about these movies, right, and these shows. But this TVA looks like a pleasant TVA, right? So the idea here I've been having with this, one of the conflicts I've been having with this show in general, is like what this TVA represents, and it could represent different things, different people. But I think the most obvious one is some kind of military or police force, right? Right. And this, one of the central conflicts is whether or not to either to abolish or reform this TVA. Here we have a reformed one, where this time their idea is that we grow together. It's like the advanced succeeding form of the TVA we saw in this early in the season, right? Instead of pruning, we're gonna let them grow and give people this free will choice, while still being here in order to monitor and protect it from evil doers like Kang and He Who Remains, etc., all the variants of baddies. And like, of course, it's hard to do a one-to-one comparison between. I mean, it's not hard, but it's not exact. What I mean to say, it's not an exact one-to-one comparison to the U.S. military or a police force in any country or something, whatever. It's not a one-to-one. It's a fantasy. It's a multiverse situation with people with superpowers and magic and shit and whatnot. But as any art, it could be an allegory, and it can espouse certain worldviews that can influence certain people in certain ways. And it could be used as propaganda by a company like Disney or Marvel or whatever, for their benefit, perhaps. Just like that McDonald's commercial used the vehicle of this Disney show to be propaganda for their product, to sell burgers and shit. Is Disney using the story of Loki to sell to its viewers the idea that it's good to have some kind of force out there to protect capital, perhaps, to protect people from evil villains going out there doing radical things like Sylvie, perhaps even terrorist? Is that what Disney is willingly propagating, wanting to put out into the world. Maybe the writers are trying to combat that narrative a little bit by including a character like Sylvie, by including the idea that, like, hey, we can make a police force better by not being so authoritarian. It's up to you to decide, really. But these are there are all these forces at work here. But I would have liked, for example, to maybe have seen Loki just be a god who doesn't really sit on a throne at the time there. Maybe uses magic with Sylvie to let the branches exponentially grow, etc., and grow together as a big tree, whatever, but not really be sitting anywhere. And maybe they can just be jumping around time, and maybe, as a unit, they can all decide, not just this TVA, but the people of all these timelines decide, oh yeah, these people, or this person is a threat to life on a universe, and maybe decentralized will decide and then work together to take down these baddies without something. Maybe and maybe the thing is that, like, without a god at the center. But of course, these this is a story about Loki the god, so you got to have Loki be some kind of command and have some kind of authority, right? Or not. You could have him be just like he always is, a mischievous god who wanders around the universe, with all this, with his time shifting powers. Now he could just wander around. And the thing is that this TVA thing, they're kind of looking more like scientists than cops. Maybe we can just, why don't we just rename the TVA to something else? That could be a cool idea too. We could also separate departments. Maybe there could be the scientists, and maybe there could be first responders who go out and help universes in dire, when they're in dire need of some force out there to protect people from some horrible enemies or villains. But yeah, I do wish we had some more closure with some of their characters, though. We do get a glimpse at, like, okay, Mobius is gonna check out his timeline and see what it's all about, see what he was yanked from. And it's definitely completely open-ended too, in that sense. Like, what is he gonna do? Is he gonna, now he knows that he has these kids there, is he let's rewind a bit. It's a nice line though, like, I want to take some time to just sit, or what did he say? He's like, just let time pass a bit. He wants to kind of linger here a little bit, as someone who spent so much time in a place without time, supposedly. But I guess you could think that maybe he decides to jump into some timeline where, I guess, back from the same timeline he was plucked from, and continue being a father, right, to these kids. And then he would eventually live his life there, and then when he was like maybe old and retired, and his kids are having their own good life with their own families or whatever, then he decides to go back to TVA and sit down at the war table. And they still call it a war table too, I think. Um, at the war table, at the council table, whatever, maybe a council table we can call it, and offer some consulting or something to the TVA. Like that's the ideal thing, right? You would think his trajectory would be, right? B15 is her name, right? Or I guess Willis was her name, and Dr. Willis or something was her name in her thing. She doesn't seem to care so much about her previous life, so she's gonna continue fighting here at the TVA. You know, we get that idea. She's gonna be one of the leaders there. Obi here updates his book, and the original Timely doesn't get that TVA handbook. So Victor Timely is just gonna be doing candle stuff, making candles. So that gets rid of He Remains' original plan, right, from episode a few episodes ago. But of course, there's a bunch of Kangs around still, a bunch of variants, because that tree has these infinite branches. So there's still a bunch of Kangs out there that the TVA is handling. Ravonna, though, we pick up with her, and she's actually here at the end of time, about to be eaten by Goliath. Not the best conclusion for her. I expect a little more. Maybe her finding another variant of Kang or something, or deciding to be a nemesis of Kang, an alternative to Kang. Maybe she will be in the future film. Who knows? But she has this light, the like this purple light on her face, right? Because Goliath is coming up near her. There we go. So I guess the implication is that she's about to be eaten and destroyed forever, and that's the end. And we don't see it actually. So anything can happen, right? Does she have her time pad on her? Mobius apparently had a time pad when he was there, and he exited, that last season. So she could probably get away. Maybe a friend, a variant of herself will come by. That would be cool, and rescue her. Open-ended. Who knows? Sylvie, though, she just like Mobius doesn't really give a clear answer, but I think her path is like the most ambiguous, right? She doesn't know where she's gonna go next. She misses Loki a little bit. She's like, it's kind of sad he's not here. It's kind of weird he's not here. But I guess they kind of acknowledge that, yeah, he sacrificed himself for us, so they're kind of content with that. And Sylvie's like off to do a bunch of whatever she wants, right? What is it? Who knows? A future movie, future show, season 6 of Loki. We'll see her. Who knows? But I do hope she doesn't go back to McDonald's. Like, the world's your oyster. She probably still has that time pad with her. She could probably do whatever she wants, right? Let's not do another commercial McDonald's, please. So I wish there was like a scene of her, maybe even a simple scene of her on the road or something in a train going somewhere, or like somewhere, go maybe she's like based on a Norse god, Loki, right? So maybe she goes traveling to Scandinavia or something. I don't know, like something a little bit more exciting, would have been nice to see. And then we end it with Loki, I guess, just accepting that he's the king at the end of time, some sort of god at the end of time, holding these threads together so they don't, I guess, explode or get too wild or something. Like, what kind of power does he wield? What kind of authority and control does it really have? Is he like thinking right there, you know what? I'm gonna start weaving in my own cool little story in here where I rule. Maybe I'm gonna take more control here, and I am the best. I would be the best type of dictator. Maybe he's thinking. Maybe I could be better than he who remains. And then he falls into his evil authoritarian arc once more, and becomes a big baddie. It seems that what we're setting up here is him being kind of like one of the gods, maybe similar to like a celestial or like one of those other gods in the MCU. I haven't watched all the movies recently, so I'm not up to date on what other gods are out there, but he could be just one of them that like has the power to, I guess, go through time and hold together time, apparently, as a big tree. But his power, it is green, similar to the time stone, which is green, so that makes sense. That fits together nicely. But he's like one of the gods of the MCU. But is he gonna be? And the question is always gonna be there. It's like that's just part of his character. Is like, is he gonna be trusted or not? Can he be trusted or not? And I think season 2 kind of solidifies the idea that like, and ends in a very positive note for Loki, in a sense where like, yeah, he's a good god. He's not a baddie. Because Sylvie here, she's all happy, and and ready to start her new life, not unconcerned with a variant of herself. Maybe because it is a variant of herself in the end, she's like, well, at least it's a variant of me and not a variant of Kang up there, holding that life stream together. I don't know, but it's still a little odd. I feel like the imagery specifically, it feels a little at odds with the idea of free will that the show really wants to put forth. And then, the maintaining of the TVA, I think is also at odds with the ending of season 1. But of course, perhaps that's the whole point the writers wanted to make, was that the first season was let's destroy, the second season is let's rebuild, right? But I guess for me politically, I just would have liked to lean more towards Sylvie's side of the idea, like, yeah, let's maybe rebuild, but not with Loki on the throne. Let's rebuild to grow together, as the TVA says, in a more democratic way. The imagery specifically feels a little bit too authoritarian. But yeah, I mean this series, like I said, probably have to sit with it a little longer, listen to some other people talk about it probably, maybe I was thinking of even doing a more well thought out analysis at some point. Go back through it and actually think about it more intensely, and maybe make a video about it, because I think it is probably still, even though I have some issues with it, some of the philosophy is a little bit muddled, but the time travel stuff is just amazing to watch. Even though like it doesn't always fit perfectly and make sense, and sometimes it's complicated. In general, it's a fun to watch, and can't go wrong with Hiddleston and Owen Wilson playing off each other. So yeah, it is like maybe one of my top, if not the top, MCU TV series. Up there with WandaVision. But the thing is also besides its politics and philosophy, it's definitely a bit blemished a bit by that big old McDonald's commercial, and it's a lot of people, I think, aren't as concerned with that as I am, which is a bit somewhat disheartening to the idea that a lot of people have just succumbed to the idea of product placement as normal and something they accept without much care, or resigned in a way that like, oh, can't do much about it, or it's necessary to like, because the production cost of all these shows are so high that they need to do that to get the big paycheck from McDonald's, etc. In order to fund these series that are ballooning in price to satisfy the audiences that want big bombastic stuff. And yet they're not, they haven't been paying their staff, whether it's the actors, writers, visual effects workers, the crew. They haven't been paying them what they deserve, as is the capitalist hellscape we live in. So I don't know. I don't really buy the idea that they use all that money from McDonald's to I guess put in the pockets of the big honchos, the big ones, the Lokis and the the gods of MCU. What I mean is the executives, the CEOs, the shareholders, all that shit. That's where that money goes. It doesn't go to the workers, as it should. So I don't know. Yeah, they could have just, in the season 1 they had Kablooey. That was a made up brand of bubblegum. A reference to a Calvin and Hobbes comic strip. So they could have made up a whole different restaurant for this season. They could have, done something else, but no. But yeah, but luckily, by the way, the actors' strike is over. I mean, they got a tentative agreement, but it should be over. It seems that they got a great deal. Next up, visual effects workers. I imagine we're gonna hopefully get a good deal. We're gonna go into negotiations, I imagine, soon. But yeah, I think it'd be nice to have a coherent video about the whole season. Not one like this or like the other ones I've been making on Just Chatting with Moonbath or Moonbath Chats, etc., where I just end up rambling and end up just being tired at the end because it's late at night. It's like past midnight right now. And I wanted to, I guess, talk about this show in a promptly manner, in a way that I could get it out there for the internet to consume, even though no one's really watching, are they? I mean, I get a few views. I've got a few views on that YouTube. Sometimes people stop by on Twitch, but I imagine very little, maybe one person at most, gets to the very end of this video, you know, or maybe zero, and if zero, that's okay too, because this is just one timeline. Another timeline, I got billions of viewers. Yeah, well, who cares really? Why do you want viewers? No one wants viewers. People want viewers, but you know, everyone who creates and makes things, they want to be seen and heard. You know, but I'm just talking to the internet. I'm just talking to a microphone. I'm not creating anything significant with this. But maybe if I make a video analysis, the highs and lows of Loki, maybe that'll be worthy enough to be seen by somebody, and for somebody to say, "Hey, that was an enjoyable video I watched, and you actually made some sense." And I've done videos like that, you know, on Dreambeam, on that channel. I mean, a couple. I mean, I've done some videos, so it's possible. I have the power. It's within my grasp. I have the potential to create something, you know, something worthwhile. Don't we all have it in us? You know, you can be a Loki, I can be a Loki. We can create our own stories. We can be variants that are not as authoritarian as Loki. Maybe we're more like Sylvie. Maybe we're like Ravonna Renslayer. Anyways, that's Loki, folks. Pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool. Timey-wimey.